Woke Supremacy News.
You were live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta in Washington. Empty folders marked classified. At least 48 of them were part of that stack of documents and items the FBI found and took from Donald Trump's resort home in Florida. That's according to a newly released and very detailed inventory of the things recovered from storage rooms at Mar-a-Lago and even from the former president's office there. What we don't know is what was inside those folders, if anything, and if classified or sensitive material is still unaccounted for. The inventory also revealing that more than 100 classified documents were found mixed in with newspaper clippings, clothing, and gifts. Trump's former attorney general and former loyalist Bill Barr is now defending the search and seizure, saying, yes, that should have been done a long time ago.
What people are missing is that all the other documents taken, even if they claim to be executive privilege, either belong to the government because they're government records, even if they're classified, even if they're subject to executive privilege. They still belong to the government and go to the archives. People say this was unprecedented. Well, it's also unprecedented for a president to take all this classified information and put them in a country club, okay? And how long is the government going to try to get that back? You know, they jawbone for a year. They were deceived on the voluntary actions taken. They then went and got a subpoena. They were deceived on that. They feel, and the facts are starting to show that they were being jerked around.
And joining me now, CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig. Ellie, I have to say, first of all, you wrote a book about Bill Barr, so it must be remarkable for you, having done all that research and written that book, to see the former attorney general talking about this. But 11,000 documents, more than 100 of them classified, mixed in with clothing and gifts and newspaper clippings, and then those dozens of empty folders marked classified. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, Jim, first of all, I hardly recognize this Bill Barr. I know we'll talk about him in a little bit. But look, the three words that jump out at me are empty classified folders. I mean, even with all the sordid details that we've learned over the last several weeks, empty classified folders. Now, it's important that people understand you can have empty classified folders where the materials have been properly removed in the due course, and sometimes you'll end up with a folder that's supposed to be empty. But you also could have a scenario where those folders went down to Mar-a-Lago with information in them and then were emptied out at Mar-a-Lago. If that's the case, that is a big problem. And prosecutors need to dig into that and figure out which scenario is it. If they were improperly emptied of classified material, where are those materials now? Did they recover them elsewhere at Mar-a-Lago? Or worst case scenario, are they gone? Are they unaccounted for? So prosecutors have a lot of questions to answer. We have a lot of questions to answer. But empty classified folders, to me, would jump right to the top of the list.
Right, they're empty, so presumably something was in those folders at one point. And we heard Trump's former attorney general slam Trump for having all of these documents, these classified documents at his club. And he also said this about Trump's push for a special master.
Well, I think the whole idea of a special master is a bit of a red herring. At this stage, since they've already gone through the documents, I think it's a waste of time.
And he also called it a crock of you-know-what. Yet the judge seemed to be leaning towards appointing a special master. At least that's how it appears at this point. What would that mean if she does?
Well, it would be a win of sorts for Donald Trump, Jim. It's what Donald Trump's lawyers went into court and asked for. They said, we want a neutral third party to come in and review these documents, and he will get the benefit of having an outsider take a look. He won't have to just rely on DOJ's judgment about whether documents are privileged. It's really important to know, though, if there's a special master, that is a detour. That does not mean this case is over. This case will not be decided, won, lost, charged, not charged, based on the presence of a special master. It will sidetrack things. It will take several weeks. But DOJ even said, if it's in its brief to the judge, they said, we oppose a special master, judge, but if you're going to do this, let's put a tight timeline on this. Let's get it done by the end of September. I suspect if the judge does order a special master, she will limit the scope and she will keep the foot on the gas here to make sure this gets done, because I don't think it's in anybody's interest to have this thing sidetracked for 2, 3, 4 months. So speed really matters here.
And Ellie, we have this new CNN reporting that within a week of the FBI search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, handed over texts and emails to the National Archives that he had not previously. They weren't classified documents or anything like that, as far as we know. But what does that tell you?
The pattern here, Jim, is remarkable. I mean, what is with all these White House officials, high-ranking officials, making off, going home with documents, and then not just turning them all over? I mean, it's very similar what we're seeing from Mark Meadows to what we saw from Donald Trump. They head home, leave their job at the White House with all sorts of documents, sensitive documents, in Trump's case, classified documents. And when they're asked to return them, it turns out they're turning them back over in this sort of piecemeal, bit-by-bit manner, making officials, sometimes investigators, beg, use subpoenas, ultimately use a search warrant. So Mark Meadows has sort of fallen off the radar a bit. Let's recall he got a subpoena from the January 6th committee. He ignored it. He was not charged with criminal contempt by DOJ. So we've sort of forgotten about him, but he's still a central figure here. And if DOJ chooses to subpoena Mark Meadows in its criminal investigation of January 6th, he's going to come right back into the spotlight as a critical player.
And the other new information that we learned, two of Trump's top White House lawyers, Pat Cipollone and Pat Philbin, had weeks of discussions with the Justice Department about executive privilege before they appeared Friday before a federal grand jury. How damning could their testimony be?
Well, we've seen a bunch of Cipollone's testimony in front of the January 6th committee. It's very important because he was present at many of the most dangerous, sort of craziest meetings that we saw, meetings where there were discussions about pressuring DOJ, pressuring the vice president. And generally speaking, Pat Cipollone was a voice of reason. He would try to talk the president and others out of some of these worst laid plans. The question, though, is where will Pat Cipollone draw a line on executive privilege, if any? Because if we remember his January 6th testimony, he would not answer certain questions about what did you say to Donald Trump. He claimed executive privilege. The committee did not have the opportunity to go to court to fight that. So the question is, will DOJ accept those invocations of executive privilege, or will DOJ go to court and say, no, those conversations are not privileged. We need to know about them. And if they get those conversations, Jim, those are the most important.
And Allie, something that really jumped out at me this week, Trump, he has been paying the legal bills of January 6th insurrectionists and rioters, and that he would even consider pardons for some of them. Let's take a listen to that.
I met with, and I'm financially supporting people that are incredible. And they were in my office actually 2 days ago. It's very much on my mind. It's a disgrace what they've done to them. I will look very, very favorably about full pardons. If I decide to run and if I win, I will be looking very, very strongly about pardons.
Ellie, what was your reaction to that?
I'm stunned. I don't get stunned that much. I know he said it before, but it's remarkable to hear him reiterate the possibility of giving pardons to people, forget about whatever political persuasion or anything else, people who destroyed the Capitol, who broke windows, who smashed items in the U.S. Capitol, who physically assaulted police officers. You can consider pardoning them. But it's worth noting, Jim, he can do that. If Donald Trump becomes president again in January of 2025, he absolutely has the power to issue pardons to January 6 rioters, to virtually anybody else, arguably, or not himself. We don't know that, but he can do that. So let's take it for what it's worth. Let's take Donald Trump at his word. I suppose he thinks there's some political benefit to this. I'm not sure how it would be a political benefit to pardon people who destroyed the Capitol and attacked police officers, but I guess I'm not the political expert here. I'm just the legal guy.
Right. Well, it certainly was a candid comment, and I think you're right. You'd have to take him for his word, at least in this instance. All right, Ellie Honig, thank you very much. We appreciate it. For all of Trump's railings and rantings against the search at Mar-a-Lago, CNN's K-File actually found the former president once held a much different view on how those who mishandle classified information should be treated. CNN's Andrew Kaczynski joins me now with his reporting. Surprise, surprise, that Trump had a different view on this when he was pointing the finger at others.
Yeah, that's right. So our team reviewed Trump's comments from his 2016 presidential run. Everybody obviously remembers the lock her up comment during that debate where he sort of famously told Clinton that she would be in jail. A lot of us remember. But he also made a lot of pretty specific comments during that campaign, too, about how he himself and his administration would be handling classified material. Let's take a listen to just one of those rallies from the summer of 2016.
On political corruption, we are going to restore honor to our government. In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law.
Now, it wasn't just Clinton that Trump targeted with this rhetoric. Even after he became president, there were those calls between Trump and foreign leaders that leaked. And there was also, everyone remembers, we started off the administration with the whole deal with Michael Flynn. His calls were leaked. He eventually resigned. And speaking with Time magazine at the time, Trump was pretty angry about this, speaking specifically on the classified nature of those calls, saying, you go to prison when you release material like that. He also was very, very, very aggressive about John Bolton in 2020 after Bolton left the administration. They left on sort of bad terms, and Bolton wrote this memoir that came out, and Trump was very angry about it as well. He then went after James Comey. He said that Comey should be imprisoned, saying that Comey, leaked classified information for basically which, there was no evidence of that at all. And in the instance of Bolton, he was very, very, very aggressive on this. We can take a listen here to just one of those interviews that he gave, and there were a number of them in which he called out Bolton very aggressively, calling for his prosecution.
John Bolton is incompetent, okay? But here's what he did. He released classified information, highly classified information, and confidential information, all different categories. John Bolton should never have been allowed to do that. The young sailor that sent a picture home to his mother and other people, they go to jail for a long period of time. You can't do that. And that was not nearly as vital, as important as John Bolton.
Now, there was an investigation into Bolton, like an investigation into Comey. Neither of them were charged, and that investigation into Bolton was actually ended in 2021.
Yeah, Andrew, it's amazing how he doesn't apply the same standard to himself as he applies to others, but he hasn't always been worried about coming across as hypocritical, as you know. Andrew Kaczynski, thanks for digging all of that up for us. We appreciate it. Great report. Days after President Biden issued a fiery warning about MAGA Republicans and the direction of American democracy in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. The Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump. MAGA Republicans have made their choice. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies.
A day later, the president was asked if he considers all Trump supporters a threat, and here was his response.
I don't consider any Trump supporter to be a threat to the country. I do think anyone who calls for the use of violence, fails to condemn violence when it's used, refuses to acknowledge when an election has been won, insists upon changing the way in which the rules you count votes. That is a threat to democracy.
And joining me now to talk about this is former Democratic Senator from Minnesota and host of the Al Franken podcast, Al Franken himself, and former Republican Congressman from Pennsylvania, Charlie Dent. Senator, let me start with you first. The president is trying to sound the alarm about potential violence without further dividing the country, and yet 74 million people voted for Trump in the last election. You saw that. We watched that live shot a few minutes ago from Kristen Holmes. There's a lot of people at this rally to see Donald Trump speak, despite everything that's happened over the last couple of years. How do you think President Biden handled things the other night in trying to thread the needle in trying to reach out to all Americans?
I think what he said was entirely proper. About 70% of Republican, self-identified Republican voters think that the election was rigged. And that's insane. It's just been proven over and over again that there's nothing there. And that's very dangerous. And look, the Republican National Committee called the incursion to the riot at the Capitol legitimate political discourse. This is extremely dangerous to say that violence is legitimate political discourse. He has every
it's important that he say this. And I do think that there are Republicans who agree with him. And there are Republicans, I think Charlie is one of them, who understand that it's kind of insane to say this election was stolen. But if you have all these MAGA Republicans, some of whom, a large percentage of whom say that violence may be necessary, that's very scary, and that the president has not just the right, but the duty to call that out.
And Congressman, what about your thoughts on the president's message, and how worried are Republicans in Pennsylvania right now when it comes to this Senate race and also the race for governor featuring Doug Mastriano, who is an election denier? I mean, he is one of those Republicans Al Franken just mentioned. He is somebody who does not believe the previous election results.
Well, let me start with President Biden's comments. I think, look, a lot of what President Biden said was accurate. The Republican Party is dominated by Donald Trump and the MAGA wing. They're ruling. But I think my problem with the president's speech was I didn't appreciate the comments about semi-fascists. I don't like it when Republicans refer to Democrats, call them socialists or communists or semi-socialists or semi-communists. I don't think that's smart. I don't think that's very good politics, and it's very divisive, even though his underlying point about an element within the party that is quite dangerous, and I agree with that. Now, with respect to Doug Mastriano, look, Donald Trump infuriated much of the Republican leadership in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania by endorsing Mastriano. He went against their wishes. They did not want that to happen. Also, many of them were backing Dave McCormick for the Senate seat, and he went with Mehmet Oz. So Trump has really, he's really crossed swords with a lot of folks in the state who can make a difference. So that has been a big part of the problem. It's even more interesting. I think this is the first time that Oz and Mastriano have appeared together. I know that Oz has not been, I think he has been avoiding Mastriano to the greatest extent possible, because Mastriano, this is a man who was ejected, thrown out of the state Senate Republican caucus in Harrisburg. I served in that caucus for 6 years. You know, you really have to work at it to get thrown out of there. I don't think it's ever happened before. So this man is very extreme on multiple levels. And I think that this is a, you know, and there are a lot of Republicans in the state, like myself, who've already endorsed Josh Shapiro, sitting attorney general, for governor, because Josh is at least a mainstream individual and a decent and honorable human being. And that's why we're backing him. But so I think that there's a real problem. And I don't know that anything that Donald Trump tonight is going to correct the issues or the problems that Mastriano has. He doesn't have the capacity to move back to the center or try to appeal to more moderate voters. In fact, he's doubled down on where he is. So this is, I'm not sure what the point of this is. And they're going into Wilkes-Barre, an area where Trump had done very well. By the way, Obama won that. Obama won that county. And then, of course, Donald Trump won it in 2016. So keep a close eye on this county. I'm not sure this is the best place to do this rally.
And Al, I mean, a federal judge unsealed an inventory of the highly sensitive government documents that Trump had at Mar-a-Lago, and it revealed that classified documents were mixed in with clothes, gifts, magazine clippings. There are also questions about empty folders that were found, 48 of them marked classified, 42 marked returned to staff secretary, military aid. We don't know if anything is missing, but the official line from the Trump team has been to downplay everything and compare it to overdue library books. I don't know if that's the line that Trump will use tonight. I suspect he is going to try to defend all of this in his own Trumpian way.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around this whole thing. It's so bad. Bill Barr and Karl Rove, anyone who's familiar with classified documents knows how unbelievably awful this is and how lame everything that Trump has been saying about this and his team. This is crazy time, and it's very dangerous, very friggin' dangerous. And we don't know where these documents have gone. We don't know these empty folders, 40 some empty folders. I mean, stops, classified. This is extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous.
And Charlie, even Trump's own attorney general, former attorney general Bill Barr, as Al Franken was just saying, he is not buying this. And let's listen to what he had to say.
If, in fact, he sort of stood over scores of boxes, not really knowing what was in them, and said, I hereby declassify everything in here, that would be such an abuse and show such recklessness that it's almost worse than taking the documents.
Yeah, Charlie, is it a good idea, given this investigation is progressing the way it is, for members of the Republican Party to share a stage with Donald Trump before the midterms?
Well, of course, I never shared a stage. No, I never shared a stage with him when he ran the first time either. I wouldn't get anywhere near him. But look, I think Bill Barr's right. I mean, what Donald Trump has done here, I mean, he was totally careless, reckless, and as Al said, dangerous with the way he has handled classified material. Hell, he absconded with it is what he did. And Al Franken and I both know we had the privilege to sit in classified briefings, and they would hand us paper. We would read the paper and we would give it back. Any of us who would have walked out with those documents, and then chose not to return them. Of course, the G-man's going to show up at our house, and they're going to take them back. It's just the way it is. I mean, this is a pretty straightforward case. I urge my colleagues at the time of the search of Trump's home to be very measured, be very careful, because this is not a time to start defending a man who has done something that any member of Congress, if they had done this, I'm sure they'd be prosecuted for it. And Trump is dangerous. And as Barr said, the fact that how could he declassify this stuff? There's a process to do this. He didn't do any of it. And we all know it. And so bottom line is that I think Trump's got a lot of problems here, and Republicans should stay a million miles away from him right now, if that's my opinion.
Yeah, Al, I've had some overdue. Yeah, I was going to say, I've had some overdue library books over the years. It never got that tense.
You know, remember when he said I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose a vote? Maybe that was true, but he'd be prosecuted for killing someone. This is illegal. This is really illegal. This is dangerous and illegal. So, yeah, maybe he could have shot someone and not lost any Trump voters. But he would have been prosecuted for murder.
Yeah, he broke the law. I mean, this is it's so straightforward.
I have to ask you, as a Democrat who would like to see Democrats expand their majority in the Senate and maybe pick up some governor seats along the way, is this exactly what you would like to see out on the campaign trail later on this evening with Trump and Mastriano and Dr. Oz? Or does it worry you a little bit that they could potentially get elected? Okay.
I want Trump to make this about him. This is going to be a referendum on Biden and on inflation and all this stuff. Inflation's going down. Gas prices are going down. There's been a number of huge accomplishments by Biden and the Congress. So things are looking better there. But man, oh man, yeah, this should be a referendum on Trump this election. I really do. I think that's a really good idea.
And Charlie,
I love that Trump is doing this.
Charlie, would you agree, Charlie, this election is now about Trump, this midterm cycle?
Well, it's becoming much more about Trump. Certainly Republicans wanted this election to be a referendum on Joe Biden and the Democrats. But now with the Dobbs decision and, of course, the raid on Trump's home, the continuing election denial, and some very MAGA candidates, winning primaries in various states like Arizona and in Pennsylvania for the governor's race. I mean, this is becoming more about Donald Trump. The fact that he's showing up in Pennsylvania, I can't imagine that Mehmet Oz wants Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, standing next to him at this general election. I think they all kind of get the joke. Okay, they needed Trump to win a primary, but they also realize he's probably the kiss of death in the general election with a lot of swing voters, which you will need in Pennsylvania. Republicans don't have a plurality, let alone a majority of voters in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Democrats have the plurality, so they need to pick up into Republican candidates statewide, certainly need to pick up independents and a significant number of Democrats. And that's why we've elected people with names like John Hines and Tom Ridge and Arlen Specter and the Scrantons and the Schweikers, who are very mainstream. We have not had a very good track record with extreme
You're getting real
candidates.
Pennsylvania on us now, Charlie.
But I'm just saying,